Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will discuss Chapter 4 of Whither Are We Traveling? Pearl of Great Price.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have our usual cast of characters. We have very worshipful brother David Colbeth from Auburn, Washington. Well, his lodge is in Auburn anyway. I'm Matt Appel. I'm in Mill Creek 243 here in Montlake Terrace, Washington. Worship brother Jarrod Dunham from Penticton 147 from Penticton, British Columbia. And Stephen Chung from Prince Charles 153 in beautiful Kelowna, British Columbia. And today we're going to continue our discussion of the article by Dwight Smith, the Whither Are We Traveling piece. And we're working on Chapter 4 today, Pearl of Great Price, which I guess I should read differently. That should be Pearl of Great Price, because there's a question mark at the end of it there. So essentially in this one, he's sort of discussing the financial aspect of being a Mason. And, Jarrod, I'm already getting...
Well, no, it's not just financial. That was the part that got me too, is it's not just financial.
Expound.
Well, then what is he discussing?
Well, isn't it? Well, no, it's because he also talks about the speed. Like we've done an episode on this, because I think what he's talking, like he mentions the cost, but he also talks about, the ease of getting your degrees and stuff. So, it's not just the cost in time and effort, not just monetary.
Which I think actually ties a lot into the previous chapter that we were, if it's too easy to petition and then too easy to advance, I think they sort of go hand in hand on some level.
Right.
Too easy to petition, too easy to get in financially. I have lots of notes about the cost, trying to figure out, I looked it up in the Bureau of Labor Statistics say that the average U.S. weekly wage is $1,070. And so he said that guy saved up 2 weeks worth of wages, basically. And back then when this was talking about the story, it was $10 a week average wages. So we saved up 2 weeks of wages to join. Now that's joining versus regular dues, but you'd have to think that the dues were pretty heavy then as well.
Well, that's funny. And I went the exact opposite. I went and converted those $1911 into 2022 dollars. So, which comes out to a slightly different amount, because $20 in 1911 was $658 now.
Okay.
So slightly cheaper, but still more than I think what we charge
for entry, at least.
Yeah,
for sure. I wish they would have cited what dues might have been, but I've heard as little as $10 or $12 for yearly dues.
Yeah.
And
I think I remember going through with Headley Lodge. I remember going through some of our old notes, and I think because we were constituted in 1905, and I think I got as early as 1912, and I think that was something like $5 a year were the dues.
Wow.
But of course, $5 a year back then was a couple $100 now. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it says a century ago it was not uncommon for men to pay what amounted to a month's wages to become a Mason, right? So, if it was a month's wages now, I mean, average that out at $20 an hour. I mean, it's a couple grand for initiation fees, right? I don't know any lodge that's charging that kind of money, right? We just actually upped ours to $500 from $450. Right.
So the last time our lodge raised their dues was when we merged. So 2018 was when the new dues schedule took effect, and I actually went back and did the same thing. I'm the secretary, so I have all the copies of the old bylaws. So I actually went through and found all the old dues levels, and I'm a nerd, right? So I graphed it and I put in Excel and tried to whip it into shape a little bit. But I was actually surprised at how much our dues. So this is in 2018 dollars. So whatever, it's a couple of years old now. But our dues as a lodge going back to 1921, it was $5, like you guys were just saying, and the initiation fee was $60. So in 2018 dollars, that was $66 in dues, which I don't know, still seemed too cheap to me. But the initiation fee was $786 in 2018 dollars, which is a lot. But our dues adjusted for inflation actually stayed remarkably constant. 66 was the low, and 100 was the high, but it bounced around in a pretty narrow band there. And I was kind of surprised at that. I expected it to be like you guys were saying, where it dropped off pretty steeply.
Be curious to be able to ask those guys back then, were the initiation fees more than just like an apron and things? Did they use those funds and put into an annuity to develop the longevity, almost like a life membership, a pseudo life membership type account?
No.
Obviously not.
I will say there's actually another guy in our lodge who did a brief analysis of, so our initiation fee is $250 for the lodge, and then there's another $50 in Grand Lodge fees on top of that. But the $250 literally, well, as of January 1st, our rent went up in our meeting space. So our rent is now, was it $275 a meeting? So it doesn't even cover the cost of renting the space to do their first degree. Never mind the apron and the second and third degree, et cetera, et cetera. So it's interesting.
And I wonder too what they would have received when they became a Mason then. More like, for example, we have liked to try to add in, have some kind of refreshment and a cake and give them, we were just talking this year about a kit, a little bit of a kit. Of course, he gets an apron, standard work, a Bible, maybe a pen, a few different things. So if you start to add these things up, 3 different meals, some kind of accoutrements to go with it, and that can add up pretty quickly. And I think ours are $175 currently. So that's certainly not enough money for all those things.
Yeah, our annual dues are $175, but our initiation fees just went to $500, and that covers the cost of everything that's involved for the lambskin apron, the Master Mason's apron that they get once they prove up, the Master Mason certificate from Grand Lodge, and their first year's dues.
Oh, covers their first year dues. Interesting. Yeah, our dues the first year, well, they don't pay them, of course, until they become a Master Mason, and then once they are, then they're due. Ours are prorated, I believe, though, for the first year. Do you guys do that?
What?
Prorate it at all? I mean, Matt and Jarrod, are yours prorated at all? If a guy comes in September, becomes a Master Mason in September, is it just 4 months worth of that 12-month dues, or is it?
It is not currently officially prorated in the bylaws, so I shouldn't confess. But yeah, no, we usually do that. We, whatever. If you come in June, we go, okay, it's $50 instead of 100.
Yeah, so whereas we don't, when they come in, they don't start paying their own dues until they're a Master Mason, and then so if they become a Master Mason in June, the next report to Grand Lodge is January, or December 31st year end. If they're a Master Mason in December 31st on the roster, then they ding us for dues in January.
I rather like the idea of having your first year's dues included in the initiation fees. It would, of course, require the initiation fees to double, basically, or at least be much more than they are now. What else would you give, or is there a reason to give things, or should maybe a portion of that dues, the initiation fees, should that become kind of like a life members, like an endowment type program where every man that becomes a Mason, he knows he's giving to the lodge future, right? $100 of his, or a portion, whatever the number is, of those initiation fees go to build an endowment of sorts for the lodge.
I don't know. It's an interesting thought. A very interesting thought. I don't know.
I've actually had a similar. So we don't own a building right now. We're renting, and there is a sizable faction of the lodge who someday we should own our own building, kind of thing. And I'm here to tell you that the way our investments are going, that someday is going to be a really long time from now. So I've been a proponent for some time now of, even if it's $10 a mason, just have something so that every year we're socking something away for this theoretical future project. And everyone says, oh, it's only $10. That's only, we got 130 guys or whatever. So that's only, $1,300 a year. Well, yeah, but if we'd started 5 years ago doing this when I first mentioned it, then we'd have, whatever, $10,000 now plus interest, and but
Yeah,
yeah,
you'll never own a building if you don't build a building fund,
exactly.
right?
And I think that I don't know, do we need to own buildings? I mean, the original Masons maybe didn't own buildings, and so I think a lot of this article, at least the first part of the article, is about that fact that hey, we're just we're requiring all this money from these guys because we're trying to keep our buildings open and pay for these beautiful buildings that we built when we thought we needed them because we had 700 people in our lodges. And so, do we really need to have these buildings that aren't self-sustaining? I know we've had this discussion before. I was going to ask, our building is 2 stories, and so we have retail down below, and in theory, it pays for itself. Are your lodges, well, I know Matt's answer, but are your lodges, your temples, are they self-sustaining or are they single purpose?
Ours in Kelowna is self-sustaining, has retail tenants downstairs that basically pay all our costs, generate revenue. So our lodges, we're lucky. We pay $1 per member $1 per member per year for rent. Right. That's how we do it.
And so if you don't have a lodge, sorry, I keep going, a temple building to have to maintain, then you charge your members $300 a year in dues. What does that money go towards?
Well, we operate on a zero balance budget, right? So whatever the cost to operate the lodge is for the year, divided by the membership. So if it's a balanced budget setup, right? And I guess if we had to pay rent, like market rent, our dues would definitely not be $300. It'd be a hell of a lot more, right? Because we're down to just under 50 members, and splitting that cost of rent up between 50 members, that would definitely increase the annual dues.
So do you think in 1911, the reason it was 2 weeks worth of wages was actually to pay for a building? My guess is not. So why do you think it was so significant for them?
To weed people out.
That I can see, because even in today's world, if you take a month's wages to join a club of any sort, that's a serious commitment, right? Got guys who talk about the Rotary, got guys who talk about all these different things they belong to, and the different costs involved. Well, we're pretty cheap in comparison now, but
Jarrod, so Jarrod, are you thinking just rich people should be Masons?
Serious people. Can I read something?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry. I've actually copied this down a few years ago when we were having membership issues, and it's from a book by Price Pritchett called Firing Up Commitment for Organizational Change. But it's about what is the value of membership. And it's the harder we have to struggle for something, the more precious it becomes. Somehow in sacrificing, we prove to ourselves that what we're seeking is valuable. Initiation rites, like high walls and narrow gates of entry, build commitment to the group through making acceptance hard to come by. Being allowed to join becomes something special, an achievement, a privilege, and it creates a sense of exclusiveness. Belonging doesn't count much if almost anyone can drift in or drift out of your group at will. If it's easy to join up, then leave and return, only to leave again, commitment can be hard to find. Make membership hard to come by and commitment comes naturally. I think the reason that it was so expensive to join something is because they wanted people who were serious about joining, because you're not going to spend 2 weeks worth of wages to join something on a whim. And you're not going to, and if you spend, I've noticed this with other organizations that I belong to, is that people don't value something if it doesn't cost them anything.
Well, that's to say, like, never not giving my kid his first car. He's going to have to earn it, so he appreciates it and puts value to it. Right? You're going to take care of it, because all those that you give them their first car, they didn't work for it. They didn't have to sacrifice, save, and do all that. You get a totally different opinion, or not an opinion, I suppose, but attitude from somebody who's saved and paid for their first car versus somebody who got it given to them. So I can see a very valid argument for that.
Now, there is a counter argument to that right now.
Sure.
Is what we're providing them worth the money?
That's what I was going to say. I had this conversation with another Mason once, and his point of view was, we've got these guys out there who want to join, let them in, but once they're in, we've got to make them, essentially we have to sell ourselves all over again and make them value the experience they've had. We've got to give them such an experience and a quality quality experience. I keep saying experience, that it's worthwhile for them to come back, and they're going to want to be involved.
Yeah, I think that sometimes we cheapen the experience in general, right? I would have if I spent $500 to join something, that I would not. You don't want to assume that you're going to get something, but you kind of assume you're going to get something, right? Certainly, you might, like, for example, we don't get a nice fancy patent of membership. I mean, you get one from Scottish Rite. We get a really nice fancy Scottish Rite patent, but I don't get one from my lodge for whatever reason.
You get an apron. Be happy with an apron. Stop asking for so much. No, but the problem is,
I get it. Yeah.
the problem is if that's what people are looking for, that's the wrong thing that they're looking for.
Well, and again, it's not that I'm absolutely expecting it, because I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
But wouldn't it be cool to have? It doesn't have to be extravagant. It doesn't have to be a gold leafed patent. No, but it just could be a nice one. I didn't expect that from Scottish Rite, but when I got it, I was like, "Oh, whoa, cool!"
What they should be getting is a quality ritual, so that you don't have someone who thinks that they don't have to memorize anything, because all they have to do is say word and get the next word.
Well, it's interesting you quoted that book, or whatever, the article you mentioned, Jarrod, because I think it's the 5th paragraph down in this first chapter 4. I put big brackets around it and said key paragraph. And if you read it, it's very similar to what you just read, and especially the last line. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
Right.
And it's absolutely true.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, because when reading this, I went to Laudable Pursuit. And they actually quote.
That's cheating. You can't go ahead. Don't read ahead.
But I have to. Are you kidding? I'm bouncing between this Laudable Pursuit and Observing the Craft. I mean, my head is spinning with. But they quote. But it is true. Like, you value like. And I know I say this all the time. Slow the hell down. They don't need to spend. They don't need to be a master mason in 3 months.
Right.
This is a lifelong pursuit. If you think that you can get everything in 3 months, what kind of effort are you going to put in when, we want you to do something else in the lodge?
Well, that's kind of the next section. Do we want to come back to that, or?
No, we can come back to it later. I don't know. I'm just babbling.
Well,
Sorry.
I mean, we could probably get another show out of this. We're not even halfway through this chapter yet.
No. Well, because first, as I said, there's monetary and then there's non-monetary. But I think, would you? Well, here's the question. I mean, would you join if it cost you $1,000 to join Freemasonry?
So I'm sure I've told this story before, so apologize to everybody that hears me a million times. When I joined, or when I was seeking to join, I didn't really know what I was seeking to join. And when I had just happened to be, I never did end up joining this golf club, but I was just thinking about golf clubs. I was interested in that idea. And yeah, it's a couple $1,000 for an inexpensive one, as much as 10,000 for a really nice one to join a golf club. And then it's a couple $100 a month plus food costs and all that kind of stuff. So it's a big deal. And one of the reasons I never joined. And and so when I got pseudo invited to be part of or to have interest in Freemasonry, I just had always assumed it was going to be something less similar to that, some kind of a significant joining and cost and all that. And so when I was sitting with my mentor at the time, he got around to finally saying, there is some cost to this. And I thought, okay, here it comes. And he says, yeah, initiation fees are $175. And that was 15 years ago. They're still $175. And I said, whoa, okay. It was a lot cheaper than I was thinking, but it's still not, it's not $5 or something. And then he said, yeah, and our dues are $60. And I said, a month? He said, no, a year. I said, oh, well, my Lions Club dues are $85 a year. And so I thought, that's interesting. And so I thought, wow, well, maybe these guys are independently wealthy and they've got lots of money and it's just kind of a token to say it's not free. But when you get inside and you start learning about the underbelly, you realize what's really going on. But yeah, if there had been a zero behind each of those numbers, $1,700 and $600 a year, it might have been a little more serious. But I was personally at a stage in my life I may have been able to more easily afford that. But I think, and he talks about it later, and I don't want to jump ahead either, that the real reason, in my opinion, is that, and I'm going to piss off a lot of concordant organizations, is that it's only $60 or it's only $100 because they're in 10 different groups. And so that is $1,000 a year for them to be a Mason or whatever.
Yeah. And while that comes in several chapters down the road, of course, I've listened ahead. So, that's a whole other thing, is the belonging to the multiple groups within Freemasonry's family of organization, right? And now we can talk about guys complaining every year, I paid $1,000 or $1,500 a year in dues. I said, well, you belong to every concordant body there is, so pick one, right? And then I go into that large debate with them for choosing multiple lodges. If one of the beautiful things about Freemasonry is that your ability to travel and visit. You don't have to belong to every lodge to be able to go and visit them, right?
That's people ask me all the time, what lodges are you member of? I say, my lodge. My lodge. I do belong to the Grand Mountain Historical Lodge, but it was a one-time $100, never anything else, and just because.
Right.
But yeah, I belong to my lodge. I like you said, that's the beauty. You can work, travel in foreign countries, and so you don't have to be a member. The only reason you want to be a member is if you have to want to be an officer. And why do you need to be an officer in another lodge?
Right. You don't need to be, unless they need you to be.
Come on, Jarrod.
Go ahead.
Memberships should not be allowed.
Now, I think that in the same jurisdiction should be.
Oh, you mean like in BC, Yukon type thing? Yeah, I mean, if you're a member of a lodge here and you're a member of, like, you were raised in a lodge in Ontario and you moved out, that I'm fine. Yeah, you're right. Plural lodges should not be allowed within your Grand Lodge.
Right. I agree.
Just there's no point. There's no need.
No.
I know there are jurisdictions like that.
What's that?
There are some jurisdictions out there that are like that. I know I'm a member of 2 lodges here in Washington, so I'm.
But we'll burn you at the stake later.
One of them's a lodge of research, if that helps any.
Oh, that's different. That's a different. That's because I don't want to say they're not real lodges, but that's more like but that's an affinity lodge, really, if you want to think about it. So I mean that makes, but like I know guys in our district who are there's guys in our district who are pretty much members of every lodge in my district. Why? Like if you want to financially support a lodge, just give them the money.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy in my district who was infamously a member. I think he was a member of 9 or 10 lodges, But the joke was that when he passed away, that all these Grand Lodge was going to go broke because their per capita income was going to plummet when he passed away.
Yeah, we've got a guy who's got I think membership in 13 different lodges, and that's just nuts, right? And that's not concordant bodies, that's blue lodges, right? So, but now to get back to bring it all back to where we were, I don't know. I think I think having higher initiation fees and higher annual dues would help in that weeding out process at the West Gate for sure. And I think you might be right, whereas, you're going to pay that much, you're going to show up, you're going to participate, you're going to, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's all right. As I said before, it's all right to charge that money as long as they're getting a quality experience. You cannot charge, you can't expect, because no one's going to keep showing up. Like, they'll pay the money once, and if they get crap, they're not coming back.
Right.
So should we come back and talk about what a quality experience is?
Well, yeah.
Sure.
Well, there you go. So on that note, as always, we enjoy hearing your comment or reading your comments on the various platforms on which one can comment. So please let us know what you think, and or let us know your input on the various topics here that we discuss. And on behalf of Stephen and Jarrod and David and myself, we want to thank you for listening to the Working Tools Podcast. Goodbye.